everyone. Welcome to Tent Talk, Farmers Market Podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. I'm Kat Fields-White. I'm a longtime farmers market manager, educator, and consultant. Get ready to catch up on all things farmers market pros with me. Today I'm chatting about managing all the events, all the time, with Christy Campli of Growing Roots Partners in Chester County, Pennsylvania. Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market Podcast, is supported by Food for All, pioneering online order systems to connect local farmers, makers, and markets with their communities. Their solutions streamline setup and management and can be adapted for market and food hub pickups and delivery systems. It's fast and flexible to set up and maintain your online inventory. Ready to add one more income stream to your farm or market? Click the Food for All logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com and find more amazing organizations that support your market and our industry when you visit the Resource Lounge at Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, coming up March 4th through 6th, 2024 in San Diego. Discounted pre-order pricing is available for just a few more weeks on individual tickets and Three's Company packages for you and your team. A year-end bonus that includes education, travel, and celebrates frazzle bonding. Sounds like a win to us. Click register on the homepage at farmersmarketpros.com today. Well, welcome back to Tent Talk. Today we're chatting with Christy Campli of Growing Roots Partners. Christy and her team cultivate community in Chester County, Pennsylvania by managing weekly farmers markets, regularly scheduled artisan markets, and annual events. She's got to be tired. Let's talk with Christy about how the skills and systems required for each type of event overlap and how they differ. We want to know how she keeps all those balls in the air and still has time to join us at Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, which is where we met her live and in person in San Diego. Welcome, Christy.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Be a good time to chit-chat, right?
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, excited too. You're coming back to Tent Talk in March, right?
Yep, I'll be at the conference in March. I'm excited.
Cool. We're excited too. So just briefly, maybe tell us a little bit of background information. What did you do in any other life before you got into all this crazy event work? What kind of career, what kind of experience, what kind of education, and how that all led you to farmers markets?
Yes, this is my favorite story to tell. I always feel like I'm having deja vu because I've told it so many times. But so I had kind of an interesting foray into farmers markets, like I feel like most of us do. But I went to school and got my degree in business administration and hospitality management. So I went to the College of Charleston in South Carolina, where the restaurant scene was really booming at the time. And I became really obsessed with restaurants and wanted to own my own restaurant one day. So that was kind of the track that I took. Starting mostly in college. So I wasn't really a career restaurant person by any means. I kind of got into it in college. And I told myself that I would manage restaurants and see if I could hack it to be kind of, my own boss one day. I am the daughter of small business owners. My parents own a photography studio here in Chester County. So it's kind of all I've ever known was small business and self-employment. And that was just the track that made the most sense for me. So after I graduated college, I actually got a job as an assistant manager on a 360-acre sustainable farm here in Chester County. So I moved back to Pennsylvania. It's called Wybrook Farm, and it was a restaurant, butcher shop and market here. And that is really how I fell in love with local food and local agriculture. So it was really just following the restaurant path and just happened to end up at a restaurant that was also sourcing primarily most of the menu from the farm. So it was primarily a meat farm, raising pasture-raised pork and grass-fed beef, and then also a little bit of produce. And so I really just learned so much more about like local food systems and where our food comes from, and became kind of obsessed with it and fell in love with local food and local ag, and have kind of followed that path ever since. So that was kind of my start. And then I ended up managing a couple of other restaurants and landed back in Charleston just because I couldn't stay away, and helped open a similar concept, a farmer-owned restaurant and butcher shop in the city in downtown Charleston, owned by a farmer from Virginia. And it was a similar concept as Wybrook. And so I really stayed closely connected with local food throughout my start of my career after college, and was at the farmers market personally as a shopper. Was really interested in where my food was coming from and the source of my food, because I had been so spoiled by working at places like Wybrook Farm and Herd Provisions, the restaurant in Charleston. And it just became part of my life and my passion. Um, and that kind of leads me into how I ended up in farmers markets.
Were you a farmers market
So
shopper all this time? Did you go to farmers markets
yes.
while you were working?
Yeah, so I was when I worked at Wybrook, I basically got all of my food on the farm, so I didn't have to go to the farmers market. If most of the stuff that we were raising or growing there, I could buy from the market. There was a retail market there. So but when I was in Charleston is when I really started becoming a true farmers market shopper. And actually just before COVID and then into COVID, when we didn't want to go to grocery stores and the shelves were bare, is when I became like a weekly farmers market shopper. So it was kind of like my fun activity of the week to go to the farmers market. And they had like pre-orders at that time. So I would get on like every week and order my veg and the meat I could get at work. So and then when COVID hit, the restaurant did, after a few months, decide to take some time to close, and everyone, kind of went in their different directions. And so I ended up back here in Chester County because I got laid off from my job and I moved home. And that was when again, like the farmers market was my only outing. I was living with my parents, so we weren't doing much. We were pretty strict with COVID, and my like big outing of the week was to go to the farmers market here, my local farmers market in Malvern, which is where I'm sitting today. And I just became friends with the farmers, and it became like part of my life. I couldn't really like imagine getting my food anywhere else, because I got to know the farmers, got to know the market manager, who I was already a family friend. And after a few months of shopping at the market every week and seeing Lisa, the market manager and owner of Growing Roots, she came to me and told me that she was getting ready to retire because she was having her first grandchild in, of all places, Charleston, South Carolina. So I had just gotten back from Charleston, and she was actually going to be moving there to welcome their first grandchild. Her daughter lived in Charleston. So I always say it was this really serendipitous moment in my life where I felt like it was the perfect like transition. I was still working in food, but the restaurant industry was definitely had worn me down by that point, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it forever. But I knew that I still wanted to be around food and kind of adjacent to restaurants and the food industry. And really, my passion for local food at that point had like grown to surpass my passion, I think, for the restaurant industry. So it was kind of this like beautiful serendipitous fate that came out of COVID, like, a positive thing that came out of COVID that landed me back here in this position. And so I took over Growing Roots Partners that fall unofficially and ran the markets for Lisa. And then it officially became mine in January of 2021.
Wow,
So
great.
I just finished my third full season. And yeah, that's my origin story. Hopefully I didn't drag it on for too long.
No, that's great. Really interesting. So we were still in peak-ish COVID when you took over, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to me, the farmers market managers that started during that, which was, obviously a really different time to run markets. So it's that, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. If you can make it during peak COVID, you can certainly run a market in more normal times. It's funny too, how many restaurant people get involved in markets. I actually owned a restaurant when my kids were growing up and had it for a long time. And it was one of those things where the happiest day of your life is when you open your restaurant, and the second happiest is when you close it and you're not on 24/7 all the time. But I did find that I missed having regular customers that I knew, and I knew what they ordered and all that. And when I opened my first farmers market, I thought, this is great. This is like having a restaurant with regulars, only I only have to do it one day a week. Of course, it didn't last one day a week. Obviously, you're doing work outside that one day a week that you're there. But also what happened with me is I opened additional markets. And so pretty soon it was back into the thing where it's not one day a week, you're working all the time. And that is kind of what happened with you, right? How many markets were with Growing Roots when you took it over?
Technically 4, and a new one that had started during COVID, which obviously wasn't a great time to start a market. So when I took over the business, there were actually 5, and we ran that new market for 1 year, and it just wasn't really viable. So so technically now I have 4 weekly farmers markets.
But that's not all you do.
That's not all I do. No.
So what other markets and events are you running?
Yeah, 4 weekly farmers markets. They're one on Thursday evenings, 2 on Saturday mornings, and 1 on Sunday mornings. They're all year-round markets. We do an abbreviated schedule in the winter time, but for they are year-round. And then on top of that, we also run monthly artisan markets or makers markets. That's a Growing Roots brand called Craft and Mercantile that I actually was my baby. I created it in 2021. We also have an annual event called Good Food Fest, which Kat was lucky enough to join us at this year.
I was so lucky.
Thank you,
to
Farmers Market Pros, for sponsoring. And then we also get contracted or hired by other organizations and communities to run their existing festivals. Or in a few cases, we have kind of created or helped create and design their events. So most of them are kind of existing events that we've taken over management of.
Yeah, so that's a lot. How many farmers and vendors on average do you have at your farmers markets?
At the farmers markets, they're relatively small, so somewhere between like 15 to 20. We will also do like occasional theme or like special holiday markets, where we'll bump up that number to like 30. I think the most we had was like 40 at our Thanksgiving market this year. But on a weekly basis, we have a lot of vendors that are actually part-time or will switch back and forth from like our Saturday markets each week. So overall, we work with about 75 farmers market vendors, but we see around 15 to like 22 on a weekly basis during the peak of the season.
Yeah, you do some fun theme stuff. Didn't you do a big strawberry kind of focus thing this last summer?
This year we started a new theme market, really centered around like celebrating the seasonal abundance. I wanted it to be like a mini festival, but I didn't want to take away from the seasonality and the key theme of a farmer's market is food and seasonality and produce. So we kind of named them after what was hot and in season then and try to capitalize on those exciting summer produce. Obviously, like berries is one we always say is like the start of our season here in Pennsylvania. It's the exciting start of like true farmers market season, even though we're year round. So we did the strawberry market in like end of May, beginning of June. We did Tomato Fest end of July, beginning of August. And then we did Melon Mania end of August, beginning of September. And we had recipe demos. Our local food bank actually came out and did like recipe samples and featured our local farmers in the recipe so that you could try something with the strawberries or the tomatoes or the melons. And then we had local organizations pop up, do kids activities. We had live music, which we usually have, but we kind of amped up our live music for those. And we just kind of promoted them as a special market. And it was really cool to see the response. And it was a much bigger market than usual. We had other vendors that don't usually come to market pop up. We had more crafters there. So it was kind of a pilot year to see how we can incorporate more programming into our markets to make it more fun and exciting on a daily basis, but still encourage shopping and for the main focus to be on supporting our farmers. So those are really fun.
Nice. Yeah, those sound like really exciting events. And it sounds like you do a lot of community programming. With a market where you have just 15 or 20 vendors, I'm going to guess stall rents don't really fund your whole operation because you've got a very involved operation. You do a lot of work. You do the festivals and live music and what have you. Do you also work with sponsors or how do you make that financially sustainable?
Yeah.
Or are the craft markets, supporting the farmers markets?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting business structure that's definitely open to change and probably will change at some point. But currently, you're right. The vendor fees don't necessarily cover the markets, but actually our events and our craft markets kind of help fund the farmers markets. The farmers markets are the core of our business and kind of the core of my personal and professional values, but they're not necessarily the most profitable. So that's why we have to kind of hustle all year round with our events and other markets that are bigger and do have other financial contributions like sponsors to help fund the farmers market. So actually in 2024, we are hoping to launch sponsorship for the markets. That's something that's been on the docket for a long time and definitely needs to happen this year. So we're hoping to bring on more sponsorship for the markets themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Sponsorship seems to work for you at the big events. I think your structure is a little bit similar to organizations like ours, actually, sometimes that when we're starting a new market and things, and a lot of folks will have a big market that's, kind of the big dog in an area and attracts a ton of vendors, and then you tend to kind of subsidize your smaller markets with that. And I think I see it a lot in LA where they do a lot of markets in areas that are suffering food apartheid and things, but those are not necessarily um, financially sustainable standing on their own, but they work as like an outgrowth of the Hollywood market or the Santa Monica market or something like that. So sounds like your artisan markets are serving kind of the same function as a really huge market would. About how many vendors do you have at the artisan markets?
So it's usually a minimum of 30, and then I think our biggest one was closer to 40. So between 30 and 40.
Got it.
And the fees are higher for those markets. So
yeah, makes sense. So in terms of operations, is it all you making decisions, or do you have a board or sponsoring organizations or anything that are involved with actual operations and application decisions and things?
Yeah, so for the farmers markets, we pretty much operate on our own. We have agreements with our hosts. So in 3 of those locations, we work with a borough. And then in 1 location is a private developer. But we are pretty much on our own. We're a contractor, and there's no exchange of money between the entities. So we make all the decisions as Growing Roots. But you raise a good question, because it definitely has, in 3 years of kind of working solo, I do finally have more staff and support in that way. I have realized that it would be helpful to have a board or a committee, even just like an advisory committee, to help with decisions and operations, and to just have like other ideas. I don't want to be the only person making the decisions all the time, because I may not represent everyone. So having staff this year is the first year that I've had basically staff out at all the markets, so that I'm not the only one at the market. So in year 1 and 2, I was kind of the guy. I was at every market. From open to close. Obviously, when we have 2 markets running at a time, I did have another market manager. But this in year 3 was the first year that I hired staff for all of the markets. So that was very helpful for me to be able to step back and focus more on the business and operations, and to have other people helping with decisions and bringing ideas to the table. And so that's been really helpful. But it's actually my goal in the next year to start an advisory committee for the markets that would involve vendors, and it would involve maybe a shopper or 2 or community member. So currently we don't have anyone that it's weighing in on operations really, or decisions. We do work amicably with our hosts. So like the boroughs or in Eagleview Town Center, the property developer there. But we kind of work side by side. They don't necessarily make decisions for us, other than, some of those bigger decisions as far as like where the market can be and what time the market can be at, that were all kind of agreed upon many years ago before my time.
Yeah. So already locations and things set up. So in addition to farmers markets, you're producing other events. Oftentimes are those in the same locations as the farmers markets?
Yeah. So our monthly artisan market's called Craft and Mercantile, which we have once a month from May until November. They are roving around to different locations in Chester County, which is also where our farmers markets are based. So actually this year, 3 of those locations are the same locations as our farmers markets. 2 of the 3 are in the same location, and 1 is in the same town, just a different location. And then we have 2 other locations for our Craft and Mercantile. So we were really interested in engaging in those communities that we're already in. And I think that's what's made the night markets so successful, is because it's in a community that we're already very well rooted in, and very well, familiar with. So we're promoting our artisan markets to our farmers market shoppers, and we're promoting our farmers markets to our artisan market shoppers. And a big part of our other events is actually to promote the farmers markets and to boost the farmers markets. So that's kind of some of our like natural marketing that we do, or organic marketing, I guess, is while we're at those artisan markets that do typically draw a much bigger crowd, we have our presence there. We have a Growing Roots booth that promotes the farmers markets and our other events going on. We sell merch, and we also do usually like kids activities. So we offer free kids activities at the markets, and that's bringing more people to the Growing Roots table, and in turn engaging with us about our farmers markets and encouraging people to come out to the farmers markets, or to come to Good Food Fest, or to come to our other artisan markets. So they all kind of work in tandem in that way.
Makes sense. So are the artisan markets are night markets, and
They are,
what day of
yes.
the week usually?
Yeah, so they're on every third Friday,
Got it.
4-hour market.
Okay. So have you thought about incorporating the craft markets into the farmers markets? Have you thought about doing a kind of a not big non-food section maybe at one or another of the farmers markets?
Yeah, so we have slowly started doing that. The intention, or I guess rule, kind of policy before I took over the farmers markets, was really that the farmers markets are food and agricultural products. That was kind of a value of Lisa's that I also share. So right now we do have some makers at our markets that are agricultural producers, like herbalists, or some of them are farmers that are making non-food products, which we love. But we also like to have kitchen and garden type products there too. So like woodworkers or potters, people making tea towels, things like that. So we have found that those are important to the market, but I'm actually hoping to bump that up even more this year to incorporate more of those vendors at the markets, which we saw with our theme markets. They did really, really well. And people like to have those other shopping options there. And because we have such a great network of makers now, we can kind of pull them into our farmers markets, and they have more of a regular presence at the markets, which is great for their business as well. And so that's how we'll kind of feed the vendors that we already work with at our artisan markets into the farmers markets this year. We hope to increase that number from like 1 or 2 to maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. So so I'm assuming there's probably some overlap with applications and things between one market and another, or one event and another. Are you kind of using the same application form, and then that person's in your files and they can participate in farmers markets or craft markets if that's their niche, or the farm festival? I mean, is that all kind of one pool of applications, or do you have 3 different systems or 4 different systems that you're managing?
Yeah, I would say that they are all separate. Because the farmers markets are an ongoing application, so we always kind of have those applications open, and we do a lot of like more direct recruiting for the farmers markets, because a lot of times we'll get applications for vendors we don't need, and we have to kind of go out and find them. So that process is definitely the most standalone, because it's just different. But for our craft markets and our Good Food Fest, it's actually a juried process. So we accept applications during usually a 1-month period. And then the jury will review those applications and make selections based on a number of different parameters that we have listed, on our website and on our application. So they kind of know up front. Local and handmade are obviously the most important as far as our craft markets go. So we don't accept any vintage or antique vendors. While we find those things are really cool, that's not really the theme or the brand of Craft and Mercantile. It's truly a local handmade market. And so we typically get way more interest than we can accept, because even though our craft markets are bigger, they're still limited. The venues are limited in space. So we do have a kind of a tough juried process ahead of us with those. So we do jury them for every single market. We do them in chunks. So we don't do it every single month. We do it like 3 times a year. But there are certain vendors that we have worked with in the past that do well at our markets, that we know what our customers and our shoppers are looking for. So there are certain vendors that we pretty much work with at every market, but we do have certain like stipulations. So out of the 3 different kind of seasons of the market, which are 2 to 3 each, you can only get accepted for like 1 of the 2 or 1 of the 3, so that we don't have the same vendors at every market. So if you go to 2 markets back to back, it'll be a completely different lineup. And then for Good Food Fest, it's just 1 application, and again, a juried process, and then we select. And with Good Food Fest, we prioritize food and agricultural vendors first, and then we fill in with food makers, drink makers, and then crafters are kind of the smallest subset of that event, because it's really focused on local ag. We want to celebrate, our local agriculture here in PA. And we will also prioritize food makers who use agricultural products in their value-added products. So that's kind of how we handle the application process for Good Food Fest, is really making sure we're centering food and agricultural products. And that even goes down to our pouring room, where we have local brewery, cidery, and distilleries. Those folks are businesses that are using local agricultural products in their alcohol. So we're pretty strict on that when it comes to Good Food Fest.
Yeah, shout out to Dressler Estates, best cider and sparkling things
and best
ever.
People. They're the best.
They are. They're the best people. Great people. Growers, cider makers. Pennsylvania really has an amazing culture around cider and things, which is been lovely to explore here. So Good Food Fest is your biggest event of the year, right? That's a big annual event. As you mentioned, I got to attend this year. I thought it was a lot of fun. Farmers Market Pros threw in a little sponsorship there, so that was good. And your large sponsor on that, or your largest sponsor, I believe, is Kimberton Whole Foods. Is that right?
Correct.
So that's a grocery store. So how do you and Kimberton Whole Foods look at that partnership? In some cases, I think we've always talked about farmers markets shouldn't think of themselves as competing with one another. We're competing with big box grocery stores. So Kimberton's kind of a special grocery store, but it is a grocery store. How do you two look at each other? Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, you tell us. Are you looking at each other as competitors? Are you looking at each other as collaborators? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, I think we are like very uniquely suited here in Southeast PA with a store like Kimberton Whole Foods. We look at each other as a partnership, and I actually look at it as one of the best partnerships that Growing Roots could ever have. I feel very lucky to be both like a friend and a partner of Kimberton Whole Foods, and I'm not just saying this because they're my premier sponsor. I truly believe in their organization wholeheartedly, and it is. While it is a grocery store and they are very much a growing brand, they started as a farm store and a family, and they are still a family business to this day. So, and it's a much different feel than a big box grocery store. And I definitely wouldn't compare it to a big box grocery store. They're a small community market. They were started, with the same background as a lot of farmers markets or farmers, as a farm store on a farm, and grew into, a small community market, and now have grown into more of a mid-sized to larger community market, that has 7 stores in our region here. So, the foundation for Good Food Fest, the idea came partly from Kimberton Whole Foods, in a collaboration effort with Growing Roots. So, Terry Brett, the CEO of Kimberton Whole Foods and founder, has always been a champion for local food and local agriculture. They actually distribute and sell over 200 local producers in their stores. And there's actually a Kimberton Whole Foods store in 3 of the 4 locations that I have farmers markets, and we work amicably. Obviously, we can't provide everything that you can provide in a grocery store at our markets. We're a much smaller scale. And so the premise of our partnership, and especially with Good Food Fest, is really just to bring more awareness to small local producers. Kimberton Whole Foods acts as, a catalyst for that event, and it wouldn't be possible without them. But they also follow the same values that we do in supporting local farmers and producers, and are great community members. I mean, they have incredible programs like their Rounding Up at the Register program, and are very giving to the community. And Terry's, just knowing Terry personally now, his his number one goal is to support his community. It's not really all about this event to make them money or to get them exposure. It's really about supporting their community, and supporting local farmers. And he is true in that. He's not just saying that. It's really what he is and what he believes. So I look at it as a partnership. We actually host one of our craft and mercantile night markets at the Kimberton location because they have a garden and gift shop. So we work together in a lot of different aspects. The partnership has grown in really to a friendship, and I'm just so grateful for all the opportunities they have awarded Growing Roots and made Good Food Fest possible.
Yeah, that sounds like a really productive partnership. And I know that they buy a lot of direct from a lot of local farmers. And I think we're all realizing that having those local farmers be able to have several income streams is really important. They actually walk the walk. They don't just say local produce. They really are selling local produce. So that's helpful.
One of the coolest things has been over the last 2 years is getting into Kimberton Whole Foods as a small local producer is kind of like a really big win. That's a huge deal for a lot of the producers we work with, because we're working with some pretty small producers. And because of the partnership and because of Good Food Fest, I think I've had 6 or 7 local farmers and or producers get their products into Kimberton Whole Foods. And that's been as a result of our direct partnership. So it's been, hey, Christy, I really want to get into Kimberton Whole Foods. And then I'm reaching out to Kimberton Whole Foods and kind of, helping to help that process along and put in a good word for some of the products that I know would be a good fit for Kimberton, and they kind of trust that opinion from me. So it's really cool to see that happen too, because like you said, the farm, to have multiple income streams is really important for some of these smaller producers.
Yeah, we see the same thing with Riverwoods Produce here in Philly, that they pick up a lot of local farmers. Do you find that the farmers that are advancing into selling into Kimberton Whole Foods, are they staying at the market, or do you lose them as a market vendor when they move into that wholesale situation?
Yeah, a lot of them are doing both. So I feel that they can kind of work harmoniously alongside each other. Of course, if some producers are in a farmer's market to build to that, that's their goal, is to get into retail, then they're going to leave us someday anyway. But a lot of them have been actually selling in Kimberton Whole Foods for years and still coming out to the market.
That's
in
great.
The same, Kimberton Whole Foods is right here and my market is 2 blocks away. And I have farmers that have been at both places for many years. So it's pretty cool to see both happening.
Yeah, it's terrific. We talk to a lot of farmers now that are finding that can be a great blend, because obviously they get the full retail price, they get a higher price when they're selling at the farmer's market, and they're developing those consumer relationships. But at the same time, doing some wholesale as well, getting a little bit lower per piece price, but having a steady, predictable sales stream is important. And oftentimes those folks, of course, are buying in larger quantities than what you're selling to customers at the farmer's market. So it's nice to see that blend. It's great. Are you envisioning doing, I know you do some community annual events. Are you envisioning doing other annual events? Are you pretty happy with the slate that you've got? It looks like Good Food Fest is a pretty big lift. How many people did you have there this year? How many vendors and how many attendees?
It's around 110 to 120 vendors, give or take. Some of those were sponsors, so I don't know the actual number of vendors versus sponsors. It's around 110, 120. And then this year we had between 3,500 and 3,700 attendees. And we made some changes from last year to this year to allow more spacing and to a little bit of crowd control. So we're hoping to increase that number of attendees for next year, now that we know we can safely kind of accommodate more than 3,700.
Yeah, you're the fairgrounds for that, right?
Yeah, so the Kimberton Fairgrounds, which is conveniently located near Kimberton Whole Foods flagship store. And it's also a venue that has multiple indoor or pavilion structures that allows the entire event, in addition to our tents that we rent, it allows the entire event to actually be pretty weatherproof and indoor. So that's the purpose of having it there. It's the only venue around that has like those pavilions and the big indoor barn that can house a lot of the event. And then we also rent like large carnival tents as well.
Yeah, it was a really nice kind of indoor-outdoor feel. I was expecting it actually to be chilly. It was the very first part of November in Pennsylvania, and it was hot. It was actually a really hot, sunny day there this year, so it was nice. But the indoor-outdoor feel of it was great.
Yeah.
So long term, with all these different things that you're doing, do you see yourself as continuing to mix it up, doing farmers markets and craft and mercantile and big annual events? It sounds like maybe financially it makes sense to do them all because they each have different financial models and they support each other. Or does your heart lean to the idea of ditching all of one kind of event and really concentrating on just a giant annual event, or just doing farmers markets and finding some money fairy to let you do that without doing craft and mercantile? Or do you love the artisans? So, I mean, what's your long-term goal, and then what's your long-term realistic strategy on it?
Yeah, I think I don't know, I'm definitely a person that is prone to like mixing it up. I feel like me and Kat are a lot alike that way. I kind of like to have all the different things going on. It keeps it exciting. And I have like such a love for all these different parts of my business in different ways. So I think the goal is really to keep all of kind of the existing work. So definitely to keep the farmers markets, craft and mercantile, Good Food Fest, and then a few of our other community events that we, are hired to organize, but to grow them to be bigger, better, and more efficient in a way that I can delegate more. So for me, it's like, it's all about like knowing your strengths and weaknesses, but especially your weaknesses. So the way that I operate is to create systems. I spend a lot of time creating the systems and a lot of time planning so that when I get to the event, it's already planned and executed and communicated to everyone. And I will be the first to admit that I'm not the best at always executing it. I surround myself with a team and people that are calm and can follow instructions and can follow the plan and help me execute, because by the time I get to the event, a lot of times I have spent so much time and stress on planning that I kind of shut down. I kind of freak out now. I've gotten better at that, but I think my long-term goal is really to grow these events and to be able to delegate parts of my business out so that I am directing all of them, but that I have a really strong team in place to take ownership of the different parts of my business, and I can then do the parts that I love and that I'm good at, and maybe delegate the parts that I don't love as much and that I'm not as good at to people that are better at it. Like, I'm not afraid to admit that there's people that work with me that are better at things than I am, and I think that's like the best lesson that I have learned by being working for myself is just to balance the strengths and weaknesses of myself and my team. And so I would like to continue with all of the events that I have going on right now. And just, find a money fairy to make it possible to delegate them, just to grow
Right.
them and find sponsors and to really just to grow each of them individually in a way that makes them more financially sustainable.
So smart. Yeah, we have a motto around here, delegate all but the genius. And by the genius, we mean which part of things that you do are something that only you can do the best in the world, but let the other stuff go to other folks that might have better talent. So sounds like you are on the genius track and you have a really good plan. Clearly, you've got a lot of spare time. Not. But what else do you enjoy doing when you're not farmers marketing and event managing?
It's funny. I think like your business really does become your life. So this was a hard question to think about, but I mean, obviously I love food and I love cooking, but I think my favorite thing to do completely outside of work is the gym. That kind of feels lame, but the gym is kind of like my safe space, and it's my one place that I don't ever really think about work. I got into the gym and lifting like maybe a year and a half ago, and it's the thing that keeps me sane, and it's my routine. It's like my favorite place. So that's probably like my number one hobby right now, I would say. But yeah, I like to spend time with family and friends, of course, and I love to eat good food. So they all kind of come back to what I'm doing at some rate.
Well, but I think that you're a little bit like me in that you have a travel bug. So I've seen that you get out and about to different places. You're coming back to San Diego. While you're in San Diego, you've been at the Intense Conference twice. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're coming back for your third time. What keeps bringing you back to that?
What's not to say? I mean, I feel like I'm the poster child for the Intense Conference because it's my favorite time of year. This is not like Kat did not pay me to say this. This is totally real. The conference was kind of a saving grace for me in my first year of business because I had no idea what the heck I was doing. And so I learned so much in that conference, and I learned so much every year from every single one of the sessions. I'm sitting there like listening to every word they say, and I just take in all the information, and I'm so inspired by what everyone else is doing and learning how people do things differently or the same all over the country and world. But I think what brings me back is probably like the friendships. I talk about my conference friends like they're my camp friends. Like I talk like my friends probably think I'm like so weird when I talk about this, but I've just met like so many amazing people at these conferences, and I'm such a people person, and I love making new friends that it's one of the most valuable parts, I think, for me is to have someone to talk about like what we do. Our job is weird. It's such a weird job. I don't really have a lot of people that I can talk to about it because we all kind of operate, as our own businesses and markets. So to me, be in a room full of people that do exactly what you do and know exactly what you do when it's such a weird job is so, so valuable to me. Like, I feel like even if it wasn't so educational and learning so much, like that part of it alone is what brings me back every year. So, and then of course I love San Diego and I can't stay away.
We actually, it's funny, we've got Kara May Woolidge from Napa and Robbie Mixon from Alaska gave us a proposal for a presentation for this coming year, and they're going to do a speed dating session for not to find somebody to date, but to find your camp buddy, to find your market mentor or your market mentee, and kind of hook people up and see who has that chemistry and wants to keep in touch, for the rest of their lives, as you do with camp buddies. And of course, we've sucked you back now. We sucked you back. That sounds harsh. We've lured you onto our team. So, you do a little bit of pre-conference work for us, which is great, and work some at the conference. But I know that you and I have talked about making sure that you're not so caught up on staff that you don't get to sit in those sessions because that's important for you. Any last things? What did we not ask you that we should have about what's next for Growing Roots and for Christy Campli?
What's next for Growing Roots is hopefully doing everything bigger and better this year. That's like kind of the cool thing about going into year 4 is we really have a foundation to just hone in on and improve everything that we already do and do it really well. I potentially have a new market coming into the mix. I'm excited to be a founding board member of a Main Street association, basically. So it's going to be called the King Street Malvern Revitalization. It's a nonprofit that we're starting here in Malvern, where one of my markets is my hometown, where my family's business is. So that's new for Malvern. There's never been a Main Street organization or revitalization effort here. So I'm a founding board member of that, which is really cool. And then, yeah, growing all my brands, hopefully adding some more help to the team to keep me sane and to make everything better. And be moving out of my parents' house, which is very exciting and scary at the same time. That's what's new for Christy Campli, I guess.
All right. Exciting. Big independence moves. We cannot wait to see you in San Diego, both before the conference to help us out a little bit and at the conference in March. And I'll be seeing you around Pennsylvania as I travel around and checking out markets and catching up with people. It was really a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for joining us, Christy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening today. And big thanks to Food for All for helping farmers and markets add online ordering to their operations with their easy, intuitive platform, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. Want to find more information and take a test spin? Visit farmersmarketpros.com and click the Food for All logo on the resource page. Ready to explore even more ways to make your market less stressful and more profitable? While you're there, click register and save your seat today for Intense Farmers Market Conference. Join us in San Diego or live online at home in March 2024.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow farmers market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros community. Follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros and find online education and other resources on our website at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Tent Talk is produced by Leandra Hayes with original music by David Mead. Tune in next week for another great episode.